All right, we're here to talk about the future of cannabis brands and distribution. When we think brands, we think more rec. By a quick show of hands, how many people here have used recreational cannabis?
Pick me, pick me.
A lot of liars in the room. But Slang Worldwide, really quickly, is a consumer packaged goods company in the most exciting consumer packaged goods category, which is cannabis. Our team has experience going to the early days of limited license, vertically integrated cannabis in Canada, the world's first regulated market for commercial medical cannabis. Actually, Deloitte, we were one of their first clients 5 years ago at Metrum Health Corp. So shout out Deloitte. Although I've had more comfortable physical exams at the doctor than Deloitte's audit experience with us, but they're extremely thorough and we appreciate that. But to talk about the future, I think it would be helpful to talk a little bit about the past. And Chris Dreesen, who runs our sales organization, has, I think, more experience than anybody putting consumer branded cannabis in the hands of stores and customers. And so I think Chris, tell us a little bit about the emergence of brands and your experience in the legal U.S. markets.
Yeah, thanks for that, Peter. We've seen an amazing evolution happen over time. I'm based out of Denver, Colorado, first U.S. market to go legal. And at the time, you had a lot of medical dispensaries also in other parts of the world or other parts of the country, where it was simply enough to have cannabis. It was good if it was good cannabis, and that was about it. And people kind of came through the door, and then as the market evolved, as more markets opened, as regulation went forward, it became more important to start developing something more than just good cannabis. So we developed the open vape device and the oil that went inside, and we did something a little bit different early on that now has become in vogue, ironically. We had a great product, and then we focused on our distribution footprint. So rather than simply say, how do we put something else into the Colorado market, we wanted to take that concept, that idea, that lightning in the bottle, and take it to more places. But really, we were building a mousetrap, because in the end, you can have a great product, but if there's no distribution, then it's not going to go very far. And obviously, to have a great product, of course, you need to have high quality, you need to have good R&D, good formulation, et cetera. But really, you've got to develop more than that. You've got to develop a brand. So certainly have seen the emergence of brands take place, Colorado, of course, California, et cetera. And so it's really kind of given birth to this consumer packaged goods concept. But at the same time, it's also caused rapid commoditization across, especially in the Western United States. Things like we no longer buy by the ton for cannabis. We buy on a commodities contract. We buy a quarter cent a milligram for just the amount of Delta-9 THC produced. And it's causing further commoditization, which really shifts the importance to how well have you built your brand? How does that resonate with somebody? Are you delivering on your brand promise? So that's become in vogue, and obviously that's something we've been preaching for a long time, as you know. I'd ask you the same thing, with California, Massachusetts, Canada, all going adult use last year. What are some of the things you've seen from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think the trend has been pretty consistent. When cannabis initially is regulated, is legalized to some extent, it starts medical. That's easy for people to get behind. It's really hard to argue that someone who's sick or in pain shouldn't have medicine that a doctor thinks is appropriate for them. And that kind of opens the door. But once that door is opened, the stigma comes down a little bit. There's a more broad acceptance. And then you start seeing, recreational cannabis ballot initiatives. Colorado was the first one, but was kind of building from a place of California in 1996 with Prop 215. And then as more and more states go recreationally legal and the taxes start getting collected, that's when things really speed up. Because, we like to joke that the most addictive drug is tax revenue. And once you get a taste of tax revenue, it's really hard to go backwards, which is why that tidal wave just starts small, gets bigger, bigger, and bigger, and it's really hard to move back from. But as you have more and more of these recreational markets, and as Chris alluded to, increased competition and an opening of the supply chain, which inevitably happens also because an opening of the supply chain, that is a move away from vertical integration, increases more players, more groups to tax, more speed for the market to grow. Brands become more and more important. Separating one product from another in categories that aren't so differentiated relies on a brand that resonates with people, that fulfills its promise, that people can separate one from another. So at Slang, we have a portfolio of brands across multiple segments, from vape, with the O-Pen, one of the first 510 thread vapes in America, still one of the most popular. Gummies, edibles, beverage, pressed pills with District edibles, Pressies, Magic Buzz. When we see that the more mature a market gets, the more room there is for each of these categories to grow. But you can have all of the products in the world. You could have 100 different brands, but at some point you're kind of screaming into the abyss. And in addition to having compelling brands and great products, you need good distribution. And again, nobody knows more about cannabis distribution than Chris, so I think he's best qualified to speak about it. So tell us about distribution, how that works, and why it's so important.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. You can have the best product ever, but if you have nobody to sell it to, if you have no footprint and distribution, then it's not going anywhere, and obviously the valuation of your business is also not going anywhere along with that. You know, one of the things, we run sales teams across the continent, from inside sales, outside sales, in-store events, merchandising, kind of run the full gamut of moving people through our sales funnel. And it's some simple concepts that we start with, but one of my favorite rules of sales is the easiest way for me to buy something from you is to know that you're selling it. And I know that sounds a little bit cliche and a little strange, but you'd be amazed, especially in cannabis with some of the more rudimentary approaches to sales, marketing, and distribution, that we kind of lose our way a little bit on just what distribution 101 looks like. And it first starts with awareness. How many doors are you pounding on? How many people are you making aware of your brand? How are you being able to put yourself in front of them to just make them aware that, hey, I'm here and I have these things available for you? Which brings me to my second favorite saying, as you know. Peter, what is the best ability?
Availability.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If your products are readily available, if they're consistent, reliable, safe, if people are responding to them, then you're going to develop a partnership with a dispensary. You're going to develop a partner who's out there purveying your goods on the front lines to end consumers. They're depending on you to fulfill that promise and to keep those products available to them. Obviously, the more popular those products become, the more difficult it becomes to keep those available. As I mentioned earlier, we source cannabis in an enormously large volume. Having to do this across 11 states and 4 countries can be challenging at times, given what the supply chain restrictions are in certain places. But that's what people have really learned to depend on us for, is availability and product. They know what they're going to get, and that's why we've developed such allegiance around our brands, because there's an expectation there, a repeatability and experience, which of course for our production teams is the holy grail. If I have this thing in Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine, or Portland, Jamaica, our consumers have a right to understand and a right to feel like, hey, I'm getting something that's going to treat me and make me feel a certain way. And we deliver on that.
Yeah, and it's not just the brand of your product, it's your brand as a business and your relationship with the stores. Chris's brand is that when he says something to people, he does it. When he goes to a store and says, you know, I have this for sale, and they say, great, we'll take this many units, and he says, we'll deliver it in 2 weeks, it's delivered in 2 weeks, and that's important because having a tight supply chain and getting products to market as you say you will is a differentiator in the early days especially. And, you know, within the supply chain, we're not cultivating and we're not retailing. We don't cultivate because, as Jennifer mentioned, it commoditizes pretty quickly. We've seen price collapse in the more mature markets, so we buy raw material as an ingredient, and we manufacture it and turn it into a finished good with our name on it, and then Chris's team wholesales it to dispensaries. We don't own dispensaries, not because owning dispensaries is bad business, but because
it's just not our business.
It's not our business, and if I had a chain of stores and Chris had a chain of stores, we're not carrying each other's house brands. I don't know what the popular chains in Israel are, but in America, you know, Whole Foods isn't going to carry Trader Joe's house brand and vice versa. So being agnostic to retail is important, and that allows you to place products on the biggest chains in the U.S., whether it's you a Live Well or a Native Roots, Harborside, Men. These products are everywhere because of that distribution strategy.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. With the rise of the MSOs, the multi-state operators, there's kind of a bit of confusion about who's doing what and where are they going to make hay, so to speak. And for us, we want to be everybody's wingman. We're the best shotgun seat in the industry because we're Switzerland, basically. We don't have retail, so we're not a competitive threat to a lot of these guys, but at the same time, we're able to execute on a very high level and are a partner that people can depend on. I thought earlier that for the folks that saw Nancy Whiteman and her kind of explanation of partnerships was really astute, and obviously Nancy and Juana do a great job and are well known throughout the states, but it's important to develop those great partnerships. My folks are actually here in the front row, ironically, so thanks for coming, Mom and Dad. But they taught me something really very early on in life that really has held true throughout my professional career, and that life's a people game. The better you are at people, the better you are at relating to people, the better you are at building rapport and establishing trust, the better you're going to do in business. So that dynamic, I think, holds true, even more so in cannabis because there's so much shenanigans, so to speak.
It's a rapidly growing industry. There's lots of players. Trust is vitally important, and you can't hack trust. You can't jam assets together to create more trust the way you could create bigger market caps or more infrastructure capacity, and it's something you can't create overnight. Speaking to your point about different people, different business models, different assets, it being unclear who owns what and what should be valued what. We're talking about the future, and I think when I look at the future of cannabis, I kind of look through the crystal ball of the mainstream economy, where value is created, how it's assigned, and I apply that to cannabis. We look out into the real world and we say, Coca-Cola has a 8-odd times higher price to sales multiple to 7-Eleven. It's the brand everybody knows, it's the retailer everybody knows. Again, I keep using American references, but 7-Eleven's still a massive company.
With relatively similar revenues, right? Those
higher
two
revenues
together.
In some cases, the retailer versus the brand, because by definition, the retailer is putting a markup on the brand. So, we look at value, it's in the brands. Someone at Goldman Sachs told me a few weeks ago, they kind of see the mountain in the distance in the cannabis industry, which everyone kind of agrees is brands are the most valuable. Agriculture gets agricultural multiples. Retail is modeled like retail manufacturing is a cost-plus model. We know that. How we get there is unclear, so I think it's important to say that there's a ton of white space. There's a ton of there are a ton of business models that can work in the short term, and we're not here to speak negatively about anybody's model. I think retail can be a great model over some period of time, as can cultivation at the right time, as can manufacturing, and we believe in partnership and levering partnership. And Chris mentioned partnership and the importance of it. That's how we got into Florida, one of the biggest and most exciting markets in the U.S., by partnering with the biggest, most exciting operator there to us, which was Trulieve. We spent $0 to get into that market. We'll be into that market in a matter of months, and it'll be revenue generating for us because of partnership, because of their business model being complementary to our business model. So we are talking about the future, and with a minute 30 left, I think we should leave with some predictions. So I expect this is on YouTube, or there'll be some record of this that we can look back later.
For posterity, if you will.
So yeah, on April 2nd or 3rd, whatever the day is, I've crossed 10 time zones in the past week. 2019, what do you think you could say now that you'll feel comfortable looking at in 10 years when we're looking at old Canatech videos and feel good about?
I think two things are going to continue to be relevant in the cannabis industry. First, with all the public money flowing in, with institutional capital flowing in, you're seeing rapid consolidation. I think that's going to continue at an even more rapid pace. Unfortunately, a lot of the mom and pop businesses are starting to be displaced or being aggregated together for a greater cause. So I think that continues. I don't think that's a super bold prediction. That's just what's likely to happen. The one thing I do think, and it'll be more relevant to this audience, that we're coming very quickly to, you've heard a lot of people up here talk about the patient and talk about formulation for specific indication. And for so long, particularly in the United States, medical's kind of been a guise or a ruse to get you into adult use. Not that the plant's not amazing, not that there's not amazing medical benefit. It's just that it's.
To be clear, pharma and adult
right.
use
I think there's a
recreation.
coming split where true medicine and true pharmaceutical formulation and IP is going to go one way. That's not our way. And then the rest, people for wellness, people for adult use, et cetera, are going to go a different way. So, Peter, I'd ask you the same question. Give me a bold prediction.
I'm not going to be too bold. There's a video from 10 or 11 years ago you can all see where Steve Ballmer basically says, no one's going to spend $1,000 for this toy that Apple makes. Business people want click keyboards.
Damn you, Stephen Ballmer.
The iPhone's never going anywhere. So I think I can safely say that more people will consume cannabis in the future than have consumed cannabis in the past, assuming there's no crazy
So bold.
population check. And that great brands will help people differentiate the multitude of products that are in the market. And I hope if we're sitting 10 years from now on this stage, we're talking about the past 10 years at Slang and how we've been able to create and consolidate some of the best brands in the industry. So that's my prediction. I appreciate everybody's attention. We'll be milling around for any questions, but thank you very much.
All right, Peter, Chris, thank you.